enable screen sharing for me, please? Yeah,
You
cool.
can share.
Okay. Do you see it?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So let's start. What I can propose you today. So hello everyone. First, sorry, not I'm rude. So what I can propose you today is I do a small recap, or a small summary of what we did last day, and then maybe you have question regarding the practical session, and if not, we can move on to the topic of today, which is Ansible. Okay, so last day we have seen vocabulary, setting up an HPC cluster manually, and few tips on RHEL 7 to 8. So remember, we have seen that a cluster is made of, a cluster is made of one management node, okay, that is acting as the main manager of our whole cluster. We have a storage node here to spread the storage over the network so that everyone has a centralized storage. We have the login node connected to the web where our users are interacting with the cluster. And we have our compute nodes, or pool of compute nodes that are used to, well, calculate and do all the math and science and whatever. So regarding the management node, we have seen that we need a DHCP server to provide IP to whole host over the network. And also we have seen that the DHCP server is in charge of providing, I mean, yes, IP, but also all needed data for hosts that boot over PXE, so over the network, to be able to deploy the operating system later. Okay, so the DHCP server was providing which file should be downloaded by the server to start the bootstrapping procedures, bootstrapping process, etc., etc. Okay. We need a PXE stack, which is composed of the DHCP server, as we said, the TFTP server. We used Facebook TFTP server, so this small server is here to provide a very simple IPXE ROM we made, okay, which allows you to bootstrap the system online. And we have the HTTP server, which is here to provide packages, Linux kernel, init ramfs, the automatic kickstart file, all of this, and all the IPXE file also once the IPXE ROM has been loaded on the remote system. We also installed few basic commands, and I think you have seen that Clush, for example, is a very useful one that allows you to interact with multiple hosts at the same time. We also need to deploy a DNS if the cluster is big enough, okay, to have some kind of link between IP and host name. It can be replaced by the host file. We have to set up a time server to ensure everyone is time synchronized over the whole network. Well, you can configure advanced network if you want. We can configure a monitoring system, and we configured a job scheduler, Slurm, which is in charge of managing the jobs of the users. Okay, I think yesterday you have seen LDAP, so to centralize user authentication. So once your cluster is big enough, you need a way to centralize users authentication. So LDAP is a good choice. We have configured a basic NFS server. Okay, so the aim is to export basic folder across the cluster, simply so users have access to their data wherever they are, It means compute node and login nodes. We have configured a login node. Well, in your case, it was, I think, the management node who did the trick. So basically, it has to be secure because this is where your users are going to be logging to the cluster and where they are going to interact with the cluster also. So this node has to be as secure as possible. Okay. We have to ensure it is always up to date, and we need to monitor it closely. And last but not least, we have the compute node. So again, we mounted the exported storage on this node, so the users have access to their binary, to their data remotely, etc. And the job scheduler was in charge of managing resources, so to launch job, allocating computational resources. Remember also that we discussed how the job scheduler is working, managing the jobs in the jobs queue to maximize cluster usage over the time. So today, well, last day we did everything manually, remember? Okay, so the idea was you learn how to do things manually so you understand deeply how things work at a simple stage. So we tried to create the most generic cluster possible, something that would always work on any kind of hardware, and then you will be able to do something more sophisticated. Today, we are going to work on how to automate all of this, okay? Because once you have a bigger cluster, once you are in production, you need a way to deploy things automatically. You cannot rely on script all the time. I mean, scripts are okay. Myself, on my own, I use a lot of them. I create a lot of scripts. But if you want to have something production ready, stable, and that can be supported on the long time, scripts are going to be a pain for you to maintain. They are prone to error. You cannot rely on other users' script because they are difficult to integrate in your script, etc., etc. So today we are going to learn how to automate everything using Ansible. So before we start with Ansible, are there some questions regarding the practical session of the first day? Just to know.
So regarding the practical.
No, everything was fine.
Call me a question. Okay. Good morning. I have a question. So while I was doing mine, I made a mistake while changing the IP address. Sorry? Okay.
You made a
Yeah. So I made a mistake while I was setting up the IP address. Sorry,
Mhm.
let me just look for it. So how do I know that ENS? Because there were different. Yeah, there was ENS 18 and ENS 19 for my account. So how do I
Mhm.
know which ENS, like with the IP address, which ENS to change?
Um, you can use this. Do you see my screen? Yes, I think. You can use IPA, okay, to show all the connection available. So first, for example, in the case of your VM, you can see that you add an IP on the first one. It's not the same name, but anyway, you had an IP on the first one. It was the IP you used to SSH inside the system. So it means this one should not be changed. And the second one was free of IP, so you can know it was the one to use. Also, you can use NMCLI uh, on show, NMCLI connection show. So you can see what are your connection available, and you can get detail on each connection let's say I want to get more detail about this one. An empty icon show and you add the name of the interface. And if you do that, you have all the parameters used for this interface. Also, so for example, here you can see that I have my gateways, my DNS, everything set up here. And also, all of this is written here in etc sysconfig network script. And the file used by network manager are here. So if I take a look on this one, for example, I can see that my interface ENP0S3 rely on these parameters. So it's a DHCP configuration, which means everything I can see here was grabbed using a DHCP exchange with my router. Does it answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Another question. Since I made a mistake and I changed the IP address, how can I fix it?
Good question. Most of the time, when you mix, well, two situations possible. If you are on, I would say, not your management node, and this is, let's assume you did a mistake on another node than the management node. You can use the PMC, the interface. You can see the console, in fact. So in your case, it was in the interface of all the VM. You have a way to see the login, something like this in my case. You see, for example, I can see my VM this way. I can see the console of my VM. Okay, so this is the only way to recover when you cannot SSH anymore on the system. Okay, if you mixed up with your management node, bad luck. You have to go on site and plug a keyboard on the screen. See what I mean? So you have to be extremely careful when you do change on the nodes that you use to reach the network. Okay, because you're going to have very big troubles if you do a mistake. Well, that's the way it is. Network is always tricky. You have to be careful not to cut your own way to reach the cluster. But once you have reached the cluster, you are going to use the BMC. Okay, you remember the small board management controller to access the console of the system, and you can log in this way and update the network. And sometime when you really broke everything, you redeploy the system. I hope it answers your question.
Morning, Benoit.
Good morning.
I have a question. It's about Slurm.
Yeah.
Okay. While I'm doing my practice, I couldn't start my Slurm. Okay.
Okay. Mhm.
And I was trying to see where it has failed, but I couldn't see it. And I don't know if you have any command line to see where I failed my configuration to go back there and made it.
Yes. Give me a few seconds. Okay, perfect. So basically, when you want to debug Slurm, there are few steps to check. Okay. First, if Slurm do not start, let's assume Slurm just the service is failing. Okay. So this is the first possible situation. If the service is failing, the best way to check what's going on, you grab the name of the service. Okay, because Slurm can do that. You ask debug -d. You see my screen, it's big enough or not? I can increase it a bit. Okay, so -d, okay, to set
Please.
I want, and then you add 1, 2, 3, 4,
Beno,
5, 6 feet. Yes.
please can you increase the font size of the terminal?
Mhm.
Thank you.
This way is better.
A bit bigger.
Okay. This way?
Yeah, it's okay. Thank
Okay,
you.
you're welcome. So Slurm allows these two parameters to be combined. -d means I want to activate debug, and well, VVVVV means I want a lot of verbosity. And when you start it this way, Slurm is going to chat a lot. And Slurm is kind of a nice guy because he will tell you exactly what's going on. So let's do an error. Okay, let's edit the file. So I do something absolutely insane. And I start Slurm. See, there was an error in line 3 with this. Slurm is very, very nice for this. It will exactly tell you what's going on. Okay, so now if Slurm accept to start, it happens. Okay, but your node are not able to connect your controller. Okay, it happens a lot. And the debug procedure is the following. Slurm rely on munge. Okay, this small stuff. Remember, the munge tool we built on the munge key that is here. Okay. Sorry, something on my screen. Okay, so the munge key is here. So when you want to ensure Slurm is working or not, you need to check step 1. Check if munge is running on all the hosts. Step 2, this way. Check that your munge key is the same everywhere. So you on all the hosts you do md5 sum, and you check if your key has the same checksum on all hosts, because they need to share the exact same key. Step 3, restart munge, because maybe you never restarted, you updated the key and you never restarted the daemon, so it's still running the old one. Step 4, you need to ensure, and this is mandatory, that the time is exactly the same on all the hosts. 5-second delay allowed, not more. Okay. So you do a clutch command, something like this, clutch, with all your hosts, and you ask for the exact time. Okay, and you check your local time also, and they have to match at few seconds. Okay, because if the time is different, the munge authentication is not going to work. So your node will try to connect, but the credential is not working. The last step, if still it's not working, you shut down the services, so slurm ctld and slurmd. In one shell, you start your slurmd this way with debug stuff, okay? On the compute node, you do exactly the same. You start slurmd with the same parameter, and you check what's going on. You check how they exchange, how they communicate, and you will see in the log of the system that they try to, what they are doing, and if they try to communicate what's going on. Okay, so you start the slurmd first. You wait for it to be initialized, and once it's ready, you start the small slurmd daemon on the compute node, and you check what's going on. If my slurm ctld main controller is receiving something or not, etc., etc. This is the debug procedure of slurm. I have never seen a case it's not working. Okay, of course, if you have a firewall, just lower it down, the time to check, of course. Maybe it's a firewall.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any more questions?
No?
I also had issues with the ENS, and I was wondering, in the first person that asked the question. Morning, Beno.
Good morning.
I also had issue with the ENS to change, and I was wondering if the first answer you gave will be the same for everyone. he changed the first instead of the second, but from the explanation you gave, there's a way to probe to know which one to change. Maybe he's down the second one, the second ENS. Will it be same for me as well, for everyone?
Well, it's honestly, it's always difficult because here we have host with only two network interfaces. Okay, most of the time on the cluster you have more, you have a lot of interfaces. It's always a bit tricky to find which one to change. What is sure? Okay, 100% sure is you have to be careful not to modify the interface you are using to SSH into the system. Okay, so right now, for example, here to access my VM, I did that. Okay, I SSH in that IP, same. And so this is the one I used. So if I change anything on this interface, I am pretty sure to have some issues. Okay, so by default, that's what's going on. If you change something else on the other interface, if you do an issue, you can recover later. It's okay. See what I mean? Also, maybe something you want to do, but you don't do that in production, of course. But once, when you are in time of deploying the cluster, you can use this small tool, ETH tool, and provide it the name of the interface. This one, for example. Okay, so ETH tool, the name of the interface, and it will provide you a lot of data, interesting data, and it will tell you if the link is up or down. So you can go on site and unplug all the cable, just get keep the cable you need to SSH onto the system, and well, brute force it, check one by one which one is which one, etc., etc. Okay, it's never easy to find which interface is connected to what. Another solution, if you have management, well, if you have switches that are able to be managed, you can get this. You can get the MAC address of your interface, okay, and you can connect on the switch side and check on the port what is the MAC address you see. Okay, so you can match. Okay, so now I know on the switch side on this port I see this MAC address, which means on the system this is the interface I want to use. You see what I mean? This is a way to do it. So there are multiple ways. You can do it with ETH tool to check if the link is up or down by plugging and unplugging cable. So you just unplug one cable, you check does it change or not, etc. So you can figure out which one is which one, etc., etc. It's always tricky. Just be sure never update the one you are using to SSH into the system. Or if you do that, have a way to recover in case you make an issue. I will be honest with you, even after, well, it has been like 6 years I do this job, once a year I lose my connection because I am tired, I do a mistake, and I update the interface I am using to SSH onto the system and I lose it. And I need to call the customer, please, can you go on site, plug a keyboard, recover my connection. It always happens. So you have to be careful. I hope it answers your question.
Yes. Any more questions from anyone? I think no more questions.
Okay. So let's move on.
Yes, you can go ahead.
Okay, so Ansible. So let's start with a small introduction. I will do a lot of small demo today. It's lighter than the previous day, so you will have time to well, let's say, understand everything. It's not like the first day I had to rush a lot. Today it's lighter. Well, so the aim of this small training today is to provide technical details for you to understand and maintain an Ansible-based cluster. Okay. So we are going to cover the following version, CentOS 8.3, Okay, but it's compatible with any kind of RHEL 8 distribution, so Rocky Linux, RHEL, CentOS, whatever. It works. What you are going to learn today, it works also on Ubuntu, it works on Debian. It's compatible with everything. I mean, Ansible can be seen everywhere, so it's okay. Just be sure we use at least this version, 2.9 version of Ansible. So you can do this training on Ubuntu if you want. It's okay. So at the end, you should be able to know how to use Ansible, okay? What Ansible is made for, what it's capable of, and how to develop new role and module for Ansible. Also, tomorrow we are going to see an application, a way to apply what we learned Friday and today. It's an open source stack called Blue Bankies, and you will merge both today and see how it can be used to develop an open source stack, and you can use your own stack after that. So general knowledge. Yes, so take a seat and relax. This is the technical part. So Ansible is an open source provisioning and configuration management software. It means it has been designed to deploy configuration on system. It is not designed to replace a script, for example, okay? Don't use it to execute command. Don't use it to burn firmware or things like that. It is not made for that. Because you will see when you have an issue with Ansible, the error report is not always easy to use. So you don't want to execute something that you cannot anticipate the feedback with this kind of tool. It's a provisioning tool. It's made to deploy configuration, to install packages on the remote node, to deploy configuration file, to start services. It's not made to run specific script. Okay. So it can run on all Linux system. Honestly, you can run it everywhere, and it even works on Microsoft Windows. So if you want to practice on Windows, for example, it also works. So it has its own declarative language. It was written by Michael Dehaene, and it was acquired by Red Hat a few years ago. Okay, so you can have some kind of professional support if you need it. But it makes Ansible, well, I would say widely used. It is the most used today, most used in the world today tool to deploy configuration. Okay. Also, what you have to understand is that Ansible is agentless, and this is something important. It's a push tool, not a pull tool. Okay, nearly all the other provisioning software are based on pull. Ansible is push, and you will see it as, well, it has pro and cons. I will say the pro are, it's simple. It is extremely secure because you don't have an agent that could be a weakness to your system. But on the other side, it makes it slow. You will see it's far more slower than the other tools. So it's going to use SSH connection only to deploy everything on the remote host. So I tried to, well, in my own life, I have seen these 4 tools mainly on customer side. You have Ansible, Puppet. Puppet is widely used. Okay. You have Chief and Salt Stack. These are the 4 main tools I have seen over the world until today on the market. I would recommend on my side to focus on Ansible and Salt Stack if you want to investigate in this tool for multiple reasons. The first reason is that both tools are extremely similar. They share the same language, Jinja on YAML. They share the same philosophy. It's just that Ansible is designed for simple things, okay, for standard cluster, while Salt Stack is made for extremely sophisticated things. It's insane what Salt can do, but at the cost of a very high complexity. Okay. Chief and Puppet are, I would say, the old challenger. They are very good tool. Okay, you can use them also. It's absolutely okay. It's just that if you are new in this domain, I think Ansible and Salt are a very good way to start. So also, as I said, you can see that as the learning curve time on knowledge. Ansible is pretty fast to learn at the beginning, but at one point you reach some kind of limit. Okay, you cannot do exotic things on your cluster. On the other hand, Salt is extremely difficult to start with. It took me 1 year to understand how it works, so it's extremely complex, but I'm not that smart. Maybe it will take less time to you. But once you understand it, you can do insane things. It's incredible, but it's very complex. Okay, it's more suitable for sophisticated architecture when you want to isolate part of your cluster with a part with cloud, a part with HPC, very sophisticated system. Okay, my recommendation is start with Ansible because you need to learn everything about this. And if one day you feel that you're compressed with Ansible, you need more space, investigate Salt. Everything you have learned on Ansible will help you a lot learning Salt because they share a lot of things. And it will be easy to migrate what you have done on Ansible to Salt. Few hours and you're done. Okay, so this is my recommendation. Start with Ansible. So Ansible is a Python-based tool, fully Python. You don't need anything else. Okay, which means, well, I don't know if you know that, but Python is slow. It's very slow language. It's not like C, it's not like with Fortran, C++, whatever. It's like Java. It's very slow, okay? So it makes it simple, but make it slow. So it's a Python-based tool, which is a bit slow. It has 3 major components that you need to understand as a system administrator. You have something called the inventory. The inventory will be some kind of database. It is where you are going to store the data of your cluster, the list of hosts you are going to use, the IP used by each host, the network you are going to use, a lot of stuff. Everything is in the inventory. But you will see what a nice stuff, a very nice feature is that the inventory is not a database. It's a text-based architecture. So as a newcomer, as a new administrator system, you just have to edit file manually. It's very interesting. It's very cool. You don't have to handle a dangerous database that may fail or whatever. Here, plain text file. It's very simple. So you will list host, variable, and group. You have what we call roles. A roles is what we can say a task. Okay, so I will create, for example, a role. Let's take the training you did the first day. For example, to deploy the DHCP server, you had to install the package, deploy the configuration, the file, the dhcp.conf file, and start the service. Okay, 3 steps. A role will gather all these 3 steps. You will create a role called DHCP server. And in this role, you will say, okay, I want to install this package, generate this configuration, start this service. This is a role. It's kind of a description of a state that you want on the cluster. Okay, so I create a role for the DHCP server. I create a role for the DNS server. I create a role for the Slurm, etc., etc. And you have the playbook. The playbook is just a list of what roles, what tasks should be applied on each host. So I will create a playbook, one playbook for my management node. And in this playbook, I will say I want to execute the role DHCP server. I want to execute the DNS server role. I want to execute the Slurm controller role, etc. I will create a playbook for my compute node, but one for all the compute node. Okay, I don't care. They are cattle. I don't care. One for the whole compute node. And on this specific playbook, I will say I want to deploy the Slurm client part. I want to deploy the repositories client, whatever. Okay, so using these 3 components, you can describe a whole cluster. So all of this is Python based, okay, and it only needs a way to SSH on the remote host. So if you want to deploy a configuration using Ansible, You just need a way to SSH on the remote host. That's all. So it's pretty simple. It's not like the other tool I listed before, Salt, Puppet, Chief, that need sophisticated authentication mechanism. Here with Ansible, just ensure you can SSH on the remote host without a password, and you're done. You can deploy configuration. So it needs Python 3, but it's always installed on the remote system by default. So you can go with that. So let's see, well, we will go deeper in details later, but let's see what an inventory example is made of. Here, I describe a simple host, okay? My host is C001 for compute 001, it's a compute node. Is it bigger enough? Can you read it? Yeah, I think yes, it seems okay. So my host is this one.
Benno,
Yes.
it's not so clear for people at the back.
Okay, so I will try to.
If you can increase it a bit.
On it. Well, so this way I will zoom each time I need. So here, for example, I only have this step of zoom. Okay, I define a host. So this is the inventory part. Okay, I define a host called C001. I want to create a host C001. And all of these are variable. You can put everything you want. This is variable specified to that host. Okay. So for example, this host has a BMC. I want to configure it this way. This is, I mean, the structure you see here, I created it myself. You can do whatever you want. You can organize things the way you want. Okay. And I choose to create some kind of list of network interfaces. So my first interface is this one with this IP. This is my MAC address. I have an interconnection network with this one, etc., etc. Okay. So you create a host. You can see it here. You can set variable, this part, and you can set also groups. Above here, you can see groups. We will speak about groups later, but groups are a way to set variable to a group of nodes. You don't need to define for each host something that should be shared by multiple hosts. So you're going to create groups. Okay, I can create a group for my compute node. I can create a group for, these are two different groups. You will understand the syntax later, don't worry. I can create a group for each kind of equipment, okay, because maybe the BIOS setting are not the same, or the partitioning I want are not the same, whatever. So you can create groups. So you define host, variable, and groups. The roles now. So as I said, a role is just a list of tasks to be done. So here it's an example, it's a DHCP server role. I just say, okay, so this is a list of tasks, each small, I don't know the English word for this, so let's say this. Each this, it means it's a list, okay, of elements. So I want to install a package. This is the name of the task. You can do whatever you want. I don't care. But I said I want to install a package. The name is DHCP server. I want it to be installed. And I put a tag. The tag, you will see it later. It allows you to tag some task to easily identify them later. When you have a lot of tasks, you need to identify them sometime. Okay. Then I say, okay, now I want to generate the configuration file from a template I created. So you will see template later. It's called Jinja2. It's not that difficult once you understand how it works, honestly. It's kind of, you take the standard file you want at the end, you create some kind of gap when you want to put variable data, and it's just a filling form, in fact. Like we did at school with conjugation or orthograph, stuff like this. So you generate the templates, the configuration file, and at the end, I start the services, and I'm done. Okay, so once I will apply this on my target, so on my management node, Ansible will do all of this. Install this, generates a configuration from my inventory. It will use my inventory as data source, and start the service. Okay, so the service name is this one. I want it to be enabled. I want it to be started, etc., etc. Okay, so this is a task. On the playbook, so the last part, the playbook, you can say, okay, now I have my roles, I have my inventories, my data. I want to say, no, I want to deploy these roles on this host or a group of roles. Okay, so remember, I created my MG compute group. It was here where I defined my 0001 node. I put it in a group called MG compute because I want it. I do whatever I want. So now I said, okay, I want to deploy on all the host member of MG compute. I want to deploy these roles. Do that for me. So once you execute this playbook, it will SSH on all the member of MG compute and apply the configuration. And that's all. Simply. Okay? Well, it's not that simple, but you will see it's not very sophisticated. Okay, so let's continue. So this is our cluster, remember? Ansible is here. Once we have deployed all the operating system, it's here to push the configuration across the network, okay? And you're going to push it like each day, because when you update system, you reapply the configuration. It has to be what we call, don't remember the name, but well, it has to be, well, you have to be able to redeploy it all the time without breaking anything. Yes, it's called idempotent. It means if you apply a playbook, you should be able to reapply it after that again. And if there are no change, everything is okay. But you have to make sure you can reapply your playbook all the time, again and again and again. So if you want to update something, you just reapply your playbook again, and it will update the configuration, etc., etc. So this small schema tries to summarize what you have. In Ansible, you have the inventory, so the database made with text file and directories, the roles, okay, and the playbook, so on which roles should be applied on which host, and as the inventory, the roles, and the playbook. As the user, you will invoke Ansible playbook, the command to say I want to execute a playbook, and Ansible will connect remotely using SSH on the remote target and deploy the configuration. Okay, it will deploy it and you will see it deploying, simply put. So now let's focus on the inventory, the first part, the data, when you want to store all your data. So Ansible structure is pretty simple. Okay, first day it may seem weird because you are not used to that, but once you understand how it works, you will see it's extremely powerful. The guy who designed it was kind of smart. It's made with, well, what we called potatoes at school. If you remember, you will see. We called it potatoes group. I remember matching groups everywhere. So the Ansible power rely on host groups and variable precedence mechanism. So the variable precedence mechanisms allow you to define variable at different level inside your inventory, and some variable win against others. So this is an advanced usage, but you have to understand it to make a good use of Ansible. Okay, so I will explain groups and variable precedence mechanism. So the basic structure of Ansible is the following. Everything is installed in etc Ansible. Okay, you have the Ansible configuration file, the main configuration file, ansible.cfg. By default, you will put your inventory in etc Ansible inventory. So this is where you're going to store your data. And you're going to store your roles in etc Ansible roles, etc. You can put them everywhere you want, but these are the default. Okay. So you have to understand how inventories and folders are made to understand the groups and the variable precedence mechanism. So just a few things before we start. First, Ansible read all the file inside the inventory folder, everything, whatever the name, whatever the extension. So you have to be careful. Do not back up your file here. Don't do a cp myfile to myfile.backup. No, because Ansible is going to read both of them. So be careful with that, okay? It's like when you work with network interfaces in etc sysconfig network script, you never back up them here because the system is going to read all of the file available. Same here. Don't back up your file here. Ansible will read everything. Also, you have to understand that Ansible is going to read recursively all the file inside all the folder, and it will flatten everything. Okay, so if you have a lot of level of directories, at the end Ansible flatten everything. Okay, except if the name of the directory have a very specific name, except if it's an Ansible dedicated name. But in the other case, it's going to flatten everything. Okay, so for example, in this here, I put data.yaml inside inventories, blue folder, red folder, etc. Since blue and red are not known by default by Ansible, it's exactly the same that if I put the data.yaml just above inventory. Okay. So let's take a very simple structure. Okay, we have etc inventories. I created a folder called group vars. So this is an Ansible name. So this one is special. And I created in this folder one folder called all on wall Pikachu because I take the name I want. So I am the true ruler. So into etc Ansible inventories, this is where your hosts are going to be defined. So you will put all your host file just above, just under Ansible inventories here, like just here. This is where I put all my host file. So all file here are known for Ansible as host to be read. Okay. So for example, I created a file called host, and inside I just write Batman1. So for Ansible, now there is a host called Batman1. It will know it. It will try to use it. Okay. Then you have the group vars folder, and you can create specific folders, whatever the name you want, and there is a specific name called all. So let's take, for example, first the Pikachu folder. Everything you put here are variable. They are not host. Okay, Ansible will understand this file as variable file. So each file you put in the all folder will be given, each variable you set here will be given to all hosts, because all hosts are member of the all group by default. Okay, if I created by Batman1, by default it is a member of the all group, this one. Okay, if I also put Batman1 into the group Pikachu1, Pikachu here, it will also get access to the variable from Pikachu. If not, it will not have access to it. It will just get the variable from all. You see the idea? So you create group of node, and then you create folders for each group, and you set the variable for each group in this folder. And if you want to set a variable for all group, for everyone, you put it here in the all folder. Okay. So for example, in all, I created a file called batval, for example, and I said, okay, city Gotham, preferred color black, which means the host Batman1. When you check the variable of this host, it has two variables, city Gotham and preferred color black. Simply. Okay. And also, you can create another folder called host vars this time, and you can create one folder in this specific folder per host. So you can create dedicated variable for each host, because sometimes you may want to specify a variable for just one host. Okay, so you can use this folder. Honestly, I never used these two. Okay, the host var, I never used it because when you define your host and the etc Ansible inventories just here, you can also define variable for this host at the same just here. Okay, I will show you how. And it's much simpler than having a folder for everyone. It's boring to have a folder for all hosts. So the better way is to define your small variable here at the host level. Don't worry, once you practice, you will see how it works, okay? So if I create a folder data.yaml in Batman1 and I set Toto to true, then in my host here, if I define Batman1 and I just set with indentation, means I want to set a variable, Toto true, it's exactly the same. For Ansible, it means the same, which is why we never used host var. It's just too easy to use, not very useful. So you may wonder, where are my potatoes you talk about? So imagine this. So you can, each host has its own variable, and it also inherits variable from the group it is member of. Okay, so this is what I call potatoes. At school, I called it potatoes. So you can play with groups, okay, to ensure a host has access to multiple variable or not. So you may think, well, it's not very flexible, and hey, what happened if I define the same variable in two groups? And if my host is member of these two groups, which variable the host is going to take? For example, in the green one, I could define color is blue, and in the orange one, I could also define the variable color blue. Which one to take? And this is the fun part. It is what we call variable precedence. So you have to think 3D and flatten. Okay, it's like a giant pizza, in fact. Okay, so let's just focus on the small line at the bottom here, okay? So imagine I have my host Batman1. Currently, I have no variable, okay? Access to nothing. I am member by default of the groups all because I am member of the group all by default. So I have access to all the variables of this group. Okay, so my line my line here that represents the variable my host C, it's full blue because I am in group all. Now I am also in group equipment A, for example. Okay, let's say I want to create a group for each kind of equipment. So this one, if I define here variables that are also defined in group vars, this one will overlap because of the precedence mechanism. So once I flatten, my Batman1 will see this variable from the group vars all, and this one now are from group equipment A, because group vars win, the group vars with a name wins again all. All is the latest one. There is a list, you will see there is a list just after, I will show you that just after that. And again, if I am now, I define some variable at the host vars level, so an upper level, it will overlap the ones from group vars and group vars, the both of them. So at the end, my Batman1 variable will be the following. So it's just a matter of overlapping on winning. It's called precedence mechanism. So you have groups and priority between different positions where you define your variable in your inventory. So from the lowest priority to the highest, okay, you have the full list available online if you want in the Ansible documentation. The group vars all here is the lowest. Okay, so everything you define here have the lowest priority. Then the inventory group vars, everything else, but not all, will overlap the all. So it win against this one. Everything I define in host var here win against all the groups. Okay. The host fact are gathered by Ansible. When Ansible is executing, it is also gathering data from the remote host, the processor, the memory, the disk, the kernel, the Linux distribution version, how many cores I have on my processor, which model, etc. etc. These are called host facts. They win against everything else. The sect fact, don't worry, we don't use that right now. And the extravars. The extravars is extremely useful for you. Okay. Um, by default, when you invoke Ansible playbook, when you ask Ansible to deploy, you can on the command line say, hey, no, I am the king. I want you to use this variable right now. I want to overlap this myself because I want to test something or I want to debug something, so I can force a variable at the command line. So you can use it to check something or to force something. It's very useful at the command line. Okay, so to summarize, it's just like a giant pizza. Okay, you have groups, a lot of level of groups. On Ansible, flatten everything. And at the end, when you take a look above, you see your pizza. So this is a variable you defined. Okay, you don't see what's above my tomato here. You don't see here. Okay. So let's take an example again. I created a dictionary, so it's a variable, a kind of variable here in my group vars all, and I say, okay, Bob, Bob, my val 2 is smart, and my val, simple, I like pizza. And then I define here in group vars, but something else, not all, so something that win against all. My cat is stupid. Okay, which is true, by the way. Then, when Ansible replace everything, you will see that these one are not used because they are replaced by this one. So at the end of my host, I will see my dict with my val, my cat is stupid because this one has been replaced. And this one, since it's not defined here, is kept. So I have my val like pizza at the end. You see the mechanism? It's not that complex, honestly, but you have to practice a bit to understand all of this. So you can see three types of variable in Ansible. It's a standard YAML structure. If you know YAML, YAML is not related to Ansible. It's just that Ansible use YAML. YAML is a way to store data, to describe things. It's like JSON, it's like XML. It's a way to write things, to explain things, to describe things. So in YAML, which is used by Ansible, YAML, you have three types of variable. Basic variable, so you set name on the content, Sarah Connor. So the variable is name, and the content is Sarah Connor. You can create a list. So you can create the list names, and with indentation on small the dash, don't know the name exactly, the dash, let's say dash, chip and dale. You can define a list. Okay, so it's iterable. You can iterate with a for loop later on this. And you can create what we call dictionaries. A dictionary is, well, a tree structure of data. So here I created ship data. Inside the ship data, so I indent, the model is this, the front is this, then another small indent and thing, and I created a list inside my dictionary, etc., etc. So dictionary is kind of a tree of data. Also, well, sometimes you see it's not official. I call them Jinja to string. It's when you master Ansible, you will see that you can also inject code directly into the variable. So it's an advanced usage. Don't use it at first, but know that it exists. Okay, you can inject code directly into the variable. It's kind of strange. It's like if you were doing development, programmation, and you write inside your variable some code, some code to be also interpreted. So kind of weird, but it works. So time for a live demo. Okay. Here on this system, I have installed Ansible.
Hello.
Yes.
I have a question. Can I have a list in a list?
You're not cool. Very good question. Can I have a list in a list? Yes. Yes, you can.
Yes, we can.
Yes. Yes,
Thank
you
you.
can do a lot of stuff. Yes, yeah, I mean, it will be something like this, if I understand you well. So, sorry. Yes, I can do something like this. And create something like this. It's okay. So you have a list and a list. It's weird, but you can. Well, honestly, there are multiple ways. You will see that most of the time you are not limited by the way you can organize the data in YAML. It's more the way you can access them. Because if you do something extremely sophisticated like this, the way to access the data later is going to be tricky. So you are often limited by, no, better this way. You are often limited by what you can do when you want to access your data. Okay, but you can do it. Yes, you can create list inside list, and you can even create a dictionary now, etc., etc., etc. No more question? No? Okay. So here I installed an Ansible. Okay. So to install it, I just installed the EPEL repositories, and then I just install Ansible using package manager. Ansible is available on nearly all Linux distributions. So let's go in etc Ansible. So right now I have nearly nothing. Okay, I have the host, which is generated by default with nothing inside. You can see it's empty, just commented. And if I ask Ansible inventory, you see that I have no host, nothing. My inventory is empty. Okay. So in my all, the at means a group. Okay. So in my all, I have nobody, and in my all groups, I have nobody also. So let's create a host. To remove all of that. So I will create Odin, like we did in the training. Okay. So now if I check, oh, see, I have Odin. It's registered now in Ansible, but it is ungrouped. It is part of the group all, but it has no other group. Okay. Now let's say I want to define some, so let's see the variable, the data accessible. So the data, the variable access by Odin. So it's minus YAML. I think this. So you can see I ask Ansible, okay, in YAML output, what are the variable of my host Odin? Right now, I have nothing. Okay. When you see this double bracket, it means it's empty. Okay, it's a dictionary. So now let's define a variable for my host. Okay. I can go in. So let me get the inventory. I will move my hosts into inventories, and I will update Ansible CFG to use my inventory. Because I want to do something more than just defining specific simple host, okay? Let's check again, we have access to it. Yes, okay. So I go in my inventories, and as I said, I will create mkdir, host vars, Odin. I will show you it's better this way. You see now I have my host file, an host var, and Odin. And I will define a variable in host vars, Odin folder. I will call it, I don't know, HTML, and I want to set the color to blue. Okay, So I create a variable color blue. If I check the variable now, I made a mistake somewhere. Not a valid group definition. Okay, why did I do? I made a mistake. That's the demo effect. No, it should be okay. Ah. Okay. I shouldn't have the S here. It was a mistake. Okay. So if I check the variable accessible by Odin, you can see my color is blue. So you have access to this variable. Okay. So when I will deploy configuration on Odin, and I want to access the variable color, it will be blue. Okay. So now let's create a more sophisticated definition. Here, post. So I will create advanced host. I made a mistake. So right now, I choose to create an advanced configuration. I said, okay, I want to create the group management, and I want to define host inside, and my host is Odin. Okay, so if I check, my host is still here, and if I want to check the graph, now Odin is in management group. Okay, you see that? I defined it inside the group. In Ansible, there are two ways to define host. You can use YAML, or we call it ini syntax. Okay, the default one. So I will show you how to do that. This is YAML syntax. Okay, with indentation. Remember. So the first one is the group. Then a keyword mean host mean I want to list the host inside this group, so I can have more if you want. So I have two hosts defined. So the first one, when you create a YAML file, the first one is the group, then the keyword host to say I want to define my host, and then the list of hosts. Okay. Also, you can do it another way. It's up to you. You can create host 2, let's say this one. This is the second way to do that. I want to create the group compute. I can define my host here, C001, C002, and I can create a range, for example, and to I create a range. So if I check now, sorry. So there are two ways to define host again. YAML file. So this way, or ini file. This way. Okay. It depends on the usage you need, to be honest. The YAML file is interesting if you want to define variable for each host. Okay, when you want to define complex variable for each host, it's easier. The ini file is more when you have 1, 2, 3 small variable you want to define for each host. Okay, it's kind of difficult when you are going to have a lot of variable to be used. Okay, so let's take an example now about the precedence mechanism. right now you can see I have two groups, management and compute. Okay, so let's create the group vars all folder, and let's define, for example, in my group vars all colors again, let's define a new variable. So color here I will set it to red on my color because I want something, let's say green. Okay, so I defined two variables here in the group vars all. So if I check the variable now of in, it has color red, my color green. Okay, because remember I changed the name. Let's update it. Let's update it because it's right now it's kind of difficult. We will run this one. Just don't want to use this one, okay, because it's kind of confusing. Let's do again. I defined my colors in group vars all, okay, and this file contain color is red and my color is green. Okay, so all the hosts, because it's all, and the hosts are all members of the all group, everyone has access to this variable. So if I check the variable of Odin, this one, if I check C001, the same. Now let's say for my management node, I want the color to be, I don't know, orange. Okay, because I want to change it. I create group vars management folder. Okay, the same as the one I used here, management group. So I create management folder, and I will define a new. I will create a new file here, colors again. I say now my color is orange for this node only, for this node. If I check for Odin, my color is now orange because it is member of management. If I check for C0001, however, since it is not member of the group management, the color is still red, the one we define in group vars all. Okay? You need to practice to make it clear, but I hope it's okay for you. So that's how we manage. And if, let's say, I am the mighty administrator and I want to push my variable at execution, I can add an extra vars. You will see that. Okay, to push a variable here. And let's say now, well, it's okay, but I have my two management node. Okay, I have Odin 0 and Odin 1 here, but well, I think Odin 1 color should not be orange because I have a specific usage for it. I want it to be yellow. Okay, but only this one, only this one in this group, not all the other one. Then I can define the variable, my host file. Here I can say, okay, no, my color is yellow because I want this one to be yellow. So remember, they are member of all, of management, and now I pushed a variable here. Okay, so if we take again the precedence mechanism here, this one will fail again this one, which will fail again the host var. Defining here in the host file is equal to do the host var, as we said. So if I check now the color of Odin 1, it is yellow, but Odin 0 is still orange because I didn't change the color in this file. Okay, I know it's kind of mix up, but when you will practice, you will see it's very easy to understand. Okay, so this is how the inventory works. We define host and we set variable for host and for a group of hosts, simply. Okay, so this allows you to describe your cluster. You can create group for, say, equipment of node, but you can also create group for specific hardware. You can create group for specific bunch of node. let's say I have two kind of compute node, CPU and GPU. I can set different kernel parameters in my inventory for GPU and CPU. For example, let's say here, good example. I will remove this one. In my cluster, I have. Yes. I just finished that. If you want, and then a question. I have, so I will call it my management. Okay, I want to create now compute.
Hello, I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you show me again where you grab the a file to a group?
Where
A
are
user.
defined?
Yeah.
Okay. When you create YAML file here in etc Ansible inventories, the first string you create at the first level of indentation is the group name. So here it's a group compute. Okay. Then I say, no, I want to define the host inside this group. And here I can say I have C001, C002, and let's say C003. Okay. So if I do that, Ansible understands that I created the compute with this node inside. The group compute with this node inside. But I can name the file whatever I want, okay? It will be, for Ansible, it's exactly the same. Ansible don't care, okay? Does it answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
But if I want to create a user in all group in the same file in computer YML for
If you want to define variable for this whole group?
no, if I want, define variable in all group.
Okay, so if you want to do that, you have to define them in group vars all. Okay. Here, if I define my user, for example, whatever, etc., etc. Okay. If I can define them here, then you can see everyone has access to them. My users are here.
Yeah.
However, if I move this file to let's create another group. We created compute and management. Okay, so I have all, compute and management. I move the file from all, user, and I put it in compute. Okay, so now in compute, I have my users. It's no more in all. Then node in 0 do not have access to it.
Yeah.
However, if I take a compute node, it has access to it.
All right.
You see the idea?
Yeah.
So it allows to filter and to overlap things. Okay. And again, if I now copy this file, my users, to all again, I update it. Now I have Alice. I change. I want to create I want to remove Bob because I don't like Bob. Okay. If I check my 0001, I still have Bob because it is defined in my compute my user, and compute win against all. Okay, remember here it's a group var something else than all, so it wins against all. But if I check on Odin, since it's using this one, I only have Alice.
Yeah. Is that?
Any other question?
Yeah, you answer my question. Can you show me last time the config, please? Where you change the way to go to the groups or yeah. Ansible config, yeah. Thank you.
Where
Inventory
I
here, yeah,
inventory.
yeah. Thank you.
So where I set it. By default, well, you can put the inventory wherever you want. By default, the convention is to call it inventories.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah, so that's here. I hope it makes sense for you. So this is how you set your hosts, how you define them, how you grab them, etc. And sometimes you may want a host to be part of multiple groups. Okay, because here you can see I only have one groups for each node. But maybe I want node to be part of multiple groups. To do that, two ways. You can set it this way. So I have my, let's say now that C001 and C002 are CPU node, and C003 is a GPU node. So I want it to have a different configuration. I can do okay. I want to create children group of my main group compute, and I create a CPU node.
And CPU node, we have ended functionality.
GPU node. You see the idea? So
Yeah.
it allows me to split it.
Yeah.
But it's not very, sometimes you want to do more advanced stuff again. You can do it this way. I want let's say I want, because it's tricky, let's do it something completely weird, okay? I want Odin 001 and C001 to be part of the group Pikachu, okay?
Yeah.
I create my custom group file, whatever I want. So this time I use the other way, the other syntax. And I put inside Odin1 and C001. So I defined a new group, but this time it's the other way to define a group, okay? There are two ways. The first way, the YAML is a tree, so you cannot create complex group structure. Sometimes you need to rely on this syntax. So here I said I want to define this group. Now, with these two hosts I already defined, it's okay. I don't care. You can define the same host multiple times. Right now, you can see that I created the group Pikachu with these two inside. So these hosts are now listed here and here. For Ansible, since they have the same name, they only exist once. You don't care. But for you, in your group tree, you see that they are grouped in another group also. Okay?
Yeah.
So you will practice that in the practical session, and you will see it's not that difficult, honestly. It's pretty simple once you understand it. But it's very powerful. You can do extremely advanced stuff with that. No more question for the inventory part? No? Okay. Last tip, since everything is based on folders and file, you can easily back up everything into a Git repository. Okay, GitHub, GitLab, whatever you want. Okay, you can easily versionize everything. Okay, let's continue. Just checking the time. It's okay. So now the playbook. So playbook again are simple YAML files. you have to define inside a specific target. It can be an host, it can be a group, it can be whatever you want. You have to define how to reach it. So by default, it's SSH, but maybe you have another way. Maybe it's a container, maybe it's a CH root, whatever. So maybe you want to use something different. And you have to define a list of tasks or role to be done on this specific target. Okay, so this is how it is made. I will try to zoom a bit. Okay, so here I created a playbook called compute.yaml. Okay, at the very beginning, you have to define some kind of header, the name of my playbook, the host, target host to be used. Here it's a group, mg compute. I want to target the mg compute group. And then you can define the list of roles you want to push on this role, on this host, sorry. Also interesting, you can at the same time set a tag for each role. So once you want to execute the playbook, you can say, hey, I don't want to execute all the playbook because I know I just change a small things and I know it will only impact this one. So you can then execute the playbook, and using the tag, you can say, I want to execute this playbook, but only the tag DNS client, for example. And it will just use this part and execute only this part, okay? When you want to focus and do exactly only one thing, you can use the tag. Also, if you don't want to apply the configuration to all the compute node for a specific run, you can use the minus limit like the execution, okay, to restrict to a specific set of hosts. Okay. So then the invocation, how to execute Ansible. So by default, this is the command line to be used. So I will zoom again so you can see it. So you have to use Ansible playbook command. Then you define the path to the playbook. It can be relative or full, like this. Okay, so you can set extra vars at the execution. So as I said, extra vars always win whatever you do. So it allows you to test things, to force things, to do whatever you want. Okay, so it's kind of interesting. Then you have to define if you want a tag, minus tag. Maybe I want to only execute this part of the code. So when you tag something and you tag it here, you said I want to execute only this tag, it will only execute what is tagged with this, okay, with this tag. You can use skip tag, the opposite. I want to skip other tag, maybe. And you can use limit to restrict. If your playbook is wide with a lot of hosts in the same group, maybe you want to restrict it to specific host for this execution. So you can limit to specific host. Also, what very interesting, you can execute Ansible playbook with dry run. Maybe you want to ensure what you're doing is safe, it will not fail without applying configuration. So you use minus check. So it will just check if everything can be done, but it will not apply anything. And you can use minus diff to show in the terminal what's going on, if there are some change, what are the change, etc., etc. Okay. I have soon finished, don't worry. After that, we can exchange on the training and you can take a break. If you want to activate debug, if you have an issue, you can activate by using Ansible debug equal 1. Be careful, it's extremely debug. It's very, very, very verbose. So ensure your terminal can store a lot of line in its history, okay? The scroll history has to be very big because it's going to display a lot of things. And also, you can use minus VV. The more V, the more verbose, okay? But it's not very interesting, this part, because it's mainly on the connection, how to reach over SSH. So if you're able to SSH on the host, most of the time it do not provide interesting information. It's more this part that is interesting, okay? So now the roles. So as we said previously, a role is just a list of tasks to be achieved, okay, on a specific a list of tasks. So here is install package, generate the file, start services, and you will see that a role is again a text file, and it's a folder. It's in fact you create a folder called DHCP server. So the role will be named DHCP server. The folder name is the role name. And inside this folder, you create subfolders. In the subfolders, you can create task, for example. So task, inside you will set the task. You can create template. The template is the file to be used as source of your configuration file. So this is an example here. Don't worry, you're going to do them, to manipulate them in the practical session. And you can have file if you want to push file, default for variable, etc., etc. So this is a role, okay? So let me show you again. Let's create a very simple role. Okay, so let's assume here so my host is Odin. Let's just be sure here. Can I ping myself? No, okay. So for this demo, I want just to do something. Okay, so now I just ensure I can SSH on my host. So I want to SSH on myself, to be honest, okay? I will define my hosts. So Odin alone, without anything else, okay? And let's create a role. So I'm going to create a role, let's call it hey, okay, nice role. We are going to create a task. Is there an S or not? I use it all day and I don't remember, yes. And in the task, I'm going to create the file main.yaml. And I will say, okay, I want to create a new task. This is my name. And I want just to, what can I do? I want to install a package. Well, let's say I want to install wget package. Okay, package. Wget. Simple. Okay, I want to install the package wget. So this is my super role called hey with the task that install a package. Now let's create a playbook. So let's say odin.yaml. I don't always remember exactly the syntax. So give me a few seconds so I can copy paste it. I use it each day and I don't remember them. So it's my Odin playbook. I want to target just Odin only, and I want to execute the role hey, and I set the tag hey because it's easier for me to manipulate. Okay, and I say Ansible. Okay, I want Ansible playbook Odin, and that's all. Ansible is starting, so you can see it was executing. Gathering fact means Ansible is gathering remote fact. Remember, the facts are host data, so the processor, memory, disk, operating system, network interfaces, whatever. Okay, so its first step is to gather fact on the remote host. Then it executed my role hey, and the first task was install wget package. It say okay, it's done. So nothing to be done at the end because I already installed this package. It say okay, I have finished, and I changed nothing. Okay, change 0 means nothing has been done on the remote target. So let's remove the package. Yes, I want to remove it. And let's execute again. So you see this time, it has installed the package because it wasn't anymore on the system. So you have a change equal 1, means I did something, I did a change on your system. I changed something on the target. Okay? And we can do it with a file, we can do it with whatever you want. So let's do something more fun. I go again in my roles. Hey, I will create a template. Let's create hey.conf. Jinja2. And here I say, hello everyone. This file is hey. And my favorite color is, and here I want to inject a variable from the inventory. Double bracket, color. And it means that for Ansible, it will generate all of this and replace this part with the content of my variable. Okay, so let's try it. Let's update the task. So I want to install this package, and also I want to name set configuration. It's a template. I don't remember exactly the name each time. Give me a few seconds, please. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? SRC, yes. Okay. So my SRC is the file I created, so hey.conf.g2. On destination, I want to put it in tmp hey.conf. Okay, I don't care. Owner root, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So let's execute it again. So this time I need to set the... Yes, I want to execute it again. Oh, it changed something. Let's check the content. You can see that it created the file with the color orange. Because, remember, when we check the variable of Odin, the color is orange. So it filled the file with the color defined in the inventory. You see the idea? That's how it works, in fact. And you can access all variables this way, so you can define configuration. But if I want in my file to access someone else's variable, let's say I want to access the users from on my compute node. We do a loop for node in groups compute. So it means I want to iterate on all the node of my group compute. Let's write the node name. Node name is this. And users are. And here I can my users. So what I did here, I created a loop inside my file, okay? And I said, so when you have bracket percentage, it means I want to create some kind of logic, okay? And I said, so I created a variable, a temporary variable here, node. So for node in groups, I can call it whatever I want, huh? For TT, okay? Let's call it this way. So you are sure it's not, I'm not cheating. For TT in groups compute, so it will gather all the hosts in groups compute. Sorry, I made a mistake here. Exactly. So here, what I'm doing is I want to iterate over all the hosts of my group compute. I want to write the name of my current host in my loop. And I want to write here the users available. And since I want to get the variable defined for each host here, sorry again, made a mistake. So now I want for each host, I want to write the users, and I can access them to use host vars. The host vars keyword means I want to access the variable defined for this target host. So here it's TT. Okay. So let's finish with that, and then we can practice. I'm not even sure everyone has a user. Oh yes, so it's telling, oh, you don't have the variable my users. Maybe I called it another way. It's users. You see, for example, I did a mistake. I used my users in my template, and the name is users. Let's update it. So you can see here that the loop was executed 3 times for the 3 host member of the group compute. The first one was C001, C02, C03, and each time I just accessed the variable of each one. Let's change the one from C001 to finish. Okay. I want to update users of C001. Compute. Okay, so I just updated the users variable for this host, and I define myself. If I re-execute with a diff this time to see, and say, hey, look, I changed something. For this host, I changed it. So let's take a look at the final file. So this time I updated the variable of T001, and I accessed it using the host var, and it was written here. You see the concept? So using that, you can generate configuration file for the whole cluster. If you set the IP for all your hosts, etc., you can generate a configuration for a whole cluster. So let me show you a real life example now. That's this one. Give me a few seconds, please. Okay. Just increasing the size of the font. So this is a real cluster. And for example, here I define, okay, this is a management. This is equipment to be used. Okay, it's the name of the equipment. I created an ISMA, so it's a management node. And for example, here I define my network for this management. Okay, etc., etc. And if I use Ansible inventory minus ML, and see I have a lot of variable available, blah, 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 etc., etc. So this is a big cluster. So the idea is you are going to fill your inventory to describe your cluster. And then you are going to populate your cluster to generate the configuration using Ansible. So each time you lose a node, each time you crash a server, you don't really care. You just redeploy the operating system and you ask Ansible to apply configuration again on it, and it's ready for production. That's the concept. Okay. Where is it? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, few last words. There are many tools available around Ansible if you want that could help you. One of the most helpful is Ansible CMDB. It allows you, it's going to grab all the facts of your host and show them and organize them into an HTML page. So it's interesting, for example, once you have deployed your cluster to run Ansible CMDB over your cluster, it will use all the hosts described in your Ansible configuration, grab the data, and at the end you can check if your kernel are all the same everywhere, if you have some kind of disk full or anything, okay? So it's interesting. You have Ansible Playbook Grapher to show execution of a playbook, Inventory Grapher to display your inventory structure. You have ARA, a very known tool to record your playbook when you execute them, to have some kind of record, etc., etc. So there is a list of all the tool, all the main known tool available around Ansible. Also, you have to know that if you want to deploy something, a DNS, whatever, if you check on Google, check Ansible DNS role, you are pretty sure someone already did that on GitHub and you can reuse the sources. Okay, so it's interesting. You can share and get a lot of sources to use them. Well, since I am nearly on my final time, you can do the break just after I describe the practical session for this afternoon. So today, practical session. We are going to use a tutorial I made for Ansible for Blue Monkeys. Okay, this is the link. I will let it on the screen so you can take the time. I will let my share open. The idea is you will install Ansible this way. So you will install Ansible DNF install EPEL release. So it will activate your EPEL inside your VM, so repositories. So you have to use the VM provided, okay, remember. Then you're going to install Ansible, DNF install Ansible. After that, Ansible is installed on the system. So in this tutorial, you're going to play with variable to understand groups, variable precedents. You're going to create your own role and apply it within a playbook. So this is what the tutorial look like this time. Here, so you're going to be on this page and you have to go in, well, vocabulary to learn few things as we said today. Okay, so it is described here. Go in vocabulary first. Skip part 3. You don't care about part 3. It's for another time. Okay, so part 2 vocabulary. Skip part 3. Install first management. You don't care. And then do part 4. Learn Ansible. Okay, and here I described everything from scratch to learn how to use Ansible. Okay, what are the commands to be used, how to play with the inventory, how to add variable groups, blah blah blah, how to create your own role, etc., etc. Okay, so that's the topic for today. Learn how to use Ansible. It's a big topic. It's not that difficult. Just make sure you understand that how the inventory is made, how groups works, how the variable precedence mechanism works, and how to do simple templates. And after that, it should be okay. Any question regarding all of that? No, it was boring like hell. Okay, so what I can... Yes?
Yeah, it was okay. It wasn't so boring. We'll try the practicals.
Okay, nice. So I will leave right now because I have to go to school to get the children. Let's meet again at, for you it's 1 p.m. For me it's 2 p.m. Let's meet again at this time to continue the. So I have no more slide for today. Okay, that's enough. We need to practice. So you can start practicing right now. Take a break, of course, and you can start practicing. And this afternoon I will be here to exchange, to answer your question on fly, etc.
Okay, understood.
Yeah.
So we come back by 1 p.m. local time. and 2 p.m.
Yes,
for you. Okay.
exactly.
Thank you.
In the meantime, you can start practicing if you want.
Okay.
I will let the screen share so you have the link and the instruction.
Okay.
Then see you in 2 hours. See you
Yes.
in 2 hours.
2 hours. Yes.
Bon appétit.
Uh,
Good luck with the training. See you.
thank you.
You're welcome.